I know when I walked in here, the only other building that was a worship place that was more miraculous was the National Cathedral I had ever been in. And I just, when I walked in, I thought, wow, we have something like this in Winston-Salem. And my mom said she came here as a little girl in the 50s, 40s, and she remembered the wow factor when she walked in.
And this church has been wonderful for me. It helped me to survive a brain aneurysm 10 years ago. I really believe that the prayers of so many people of this church account for my being alive today and my being able to sit here and talk to you. So I feel like I owe this church my life, really. It's been wonderful for me.
Then we just settled here because we felt when we came here, everyone was so welcoming and so open, and the church was just reached out to us, reached out to our hearts, and we just immediately took to it.
Many important things have happened to our kids in this church. Our son was called to the ministry in this church. He was ordained in this church. He was married in this church, and our daughter was married in this church. Their friends that they still have are in this church.
And then in 1870, a man moved here by the name of Holland. He came from Smithfield, where they were having some epidemics in the years after the war. He had lost 2 wives and several children to what was called bone fever. So he moved up here and bought a house just a half a block north of the square on Liberty Street on the west side of Liberty, backing up into what's now Trade Street. He advertised in the paper to see if there were Baptists in the community, and there was only one. And about 3 people showed up. They were able to get the Baptist State Convention to send a minister to speak to them once a month, and the meeting was in the courthouse. They continued to meet in the courthouse for several years after the church was formed officially on September 22nd, 1871. And the building was built on land that had been bought by money that had been raised in Raleigh, primarily through First Baptist Church in Raleigh. They built the building on the north side of 2nd Street, midway between Church and Chestnut. And it remained there until 1898, when they bought the lot to the west of it on the corner of Chestnut and, on the corner of Church and 2nd. The old church became the Sunday school room, and they used that church from the time it opened in 1901 until 1925. When this building was built, it was still a residential community. In fact, there was still a house on the property on the corner of 5th and Spruce, right at the front of the church. This building was built in the mid-20s when throughout the nation there was a movement to build large cathedrals of religion to go along with the businesses that were building large cathedrals of business and industry.
Organs have had a prominent role in Christian worship for centuries. As an accompanying instrument for choirs, as accompanying instrument for congregational singing, and at First Baptist it's played that same kind of a role. The problems we're running into now are challenges with the wiring, with the circuit boards, with the console that is all worn out from so many years of use. So you'll hear the same magnificent sounds you've always heard, but there'll be a greater way to control it, a better way to control it, a newer way. And so this will end up with an instrument that functions much better, that is easier to play, but you'll hear the same magnificent sounds that you've always heard.
When I first saw the rendering, I was just struck because it looked like it was how it should have always been. You know, it didn't look like an artificial change. It just fit in perfectly with what I think of as the character and the feel of our sanctuary, which is a unique feel and an important part of our worship. So I was very pleased that it didn't detract.
The service is already very open, but we are restricted because of the way our space is currently laid out. By being actually up a little higher, then we can actually see even more people in the congregation.
Well, in the contemporary worship especially, but in the traditional as well, we've had problems with a lot of microphone cords, a lot of electrical cords around, and with the expansion of the platform, there should be multiple microphone jacks and electrical inputs for us to have access to that help streamline some of that and kind of tidy up the platform area.
Well, I believe God can use this moment in our church's life to reinvigorate and re-energize our congregation, to renew our hearts and minds. Because as we stretch in faith to do what we're being called to do, that's going to impact our discipleship. That's going to impact our Christian walk.
And so as a part of this $3 million campaign, we're going to be setting aside about $400,000, maybe more if we can break the campaign, if we can beat the goal, to start up a new mission fund that will be focused on meeting human needs in the community, in Winston-Salem and Forsyth, and we can even choose to extend it further. You know, we see needs in the Dominican Republic and other parts of our own country today, down in the Gulf Coast region. I mean, wouldn't it be great if we had this fund already established and we could not only send workers down there, but we could also help meet some of the human needs down there?
Well, I just think based on our location, that we're in the heart of downtown, that we have not just a lot of opportunity to serve, but a responsibility and an obligation. And this facility is not just beautiful, but it's historic. I mean, it's a major fixture in this part of this town. And I think we should do everything that we can to make sure that it meets the needs of the people that are here, but not just that, but that it's where it needs to be to meet the needs of any new members that come in. And there's so many things on our horizon and so many different ways that we can reach out that we just need to make sure that our facilities are where they should be so that those needs are met.
And our real purpose is to do what God told us to do through His Son, Jesus Christ, which is to tell others about this promise of eternal hope. And so the question becomes not whether we should do that or not, but how do we do that? And I find that the best instruction for how to do that is what Jesus did Himself when He was here on this earth 2,000 years ago. And if you go back and read the Bible carefully, when He was out moving around and He found people that had human needs, He always ministered to their human needs first. And then He talked to them about their spiritual needs.
Sacrificial giving means that you sacrifice something in order to give to the church. And for example, we're not buying basketball tickets this year, so we can give that money to the church. And that's what's involved in sacrificial giving. The offset to that is God blesses that. When we respond with our physical gifts, as well as with our physical person, but with our gifts, there's a spiritual reward that God gives us out of that. It's like, you're really willing to serve me, says God? Well, here's an extra talent, here's an extra blessing, because you're willing to do that. So
I really didn't understand what that meant until I heard Bill Hybels speak. And what he said got through to me and meant a lot to me in that giving sometimes isn't always monetary. There are many ways to give to your church and contribute, and I think that if you go to God in prayer and you just listen, like he said, then God will show you how He wants to use you in your church.
Every member's obligation to dig deep, to honor our Lord who gave His all. We should do the same.
When Randy and I were getting ready to be married 21 years ago, Randy's grandmother gave us one piece of marital advice, and she said, you can't outgive God, but you need to try. And that has stayed with me all these years. And so when I hear of sacrificial giving, that's the first thing that comes to my mind.
To pray and talk to God personally and listen for God to answer, just like Bill Hybel said, we've got to listen and let Him see what He wants us to give. And be it if it's not, we definitely need the financial aspect to this, but if we can't do that, where can we give or what can we give? There's many creative ideas that I never thought about that Bill mentioned, such as, people gave art and people have given time to paint, different things that you can do to help with the renovation. And it's so important for our church to continue to grow that we need everybody just to step up and say, God, what more can I give? Tell me where I can give it and tell me how I can find it to give.
The Bible is very clear about our call to give sacrificially. We see that so clearly in a scripture passage that most Christians know about from the New Testament. It's the story of the widow who gives her 2 mites at the temple. Jesus is standing outside the temple. He's watching all these rich religious people ostentatiously give a lot of money. But that's not what impresses him. What impresses him is this widow who gives 2 little coins. And Jesus sort of stops everything and says, folks, this is how you need to be giving. God is not nearly as pleased by the gifts of these other wealthy people because they're giving out of their overflow. They're giving money they don't really need. On the other hand, this widow, she's giving all she has, and history is going to remember her. This is a great clue that God honors sacrificial giving. It's not the size of the gift that matters so much as the size of commitment and sacrifice behind the gift. I was recently reminded of this principle in a very personal way in a mission trip that I and our youth group took to the Dominican Republic earlier this year. I was sitting in the service and it came time to take the offering. And I'm embarrassed to tell you the thought process that I had as that offering plate was passing through the congregation. I was sitting there thinking, this is one offering I can just sit out. I don't need to be giving anything. I don't belong to this church. I give to my church back home in Winston-Salem. I'm giving them my time to come down here to the Dominican Republic. I'm about to preach in just a few minutes. That's probably enough. Don't you think? Yeah, that's enough. Now that was the thought process that I was having internally as the plate's getting closer to me in my row. In the meantime, I'm watching this young mother, I'm guessing an unwed mother, I don't know, a young woman with 5 children sitting on my row. She is a representative of third world poverty. She doesn't have very much to live on, to dress with, to eat from, and yet here she is digging around in this little purse she's got to find something so that every one of her 5 children can give. I want to tell you, as I watched that, my heart melted. And I just became so humbled in the face of that kind of sacrificial giving. And I was reminded all over again of that widow who gave everything she had, because I'm sure that that day that young mom was giving everything she had through her children. And I don't mind telling you, it prompted me to dig down deep in my pocket and give a pretty big gift. And it felt great. It felt wonderful again, because I was in the presence not only of a generous woman, but in the presence of a generous God who had given not his least for me, but his most, his only son for me. And I remembered all over again what a privilege it is not to give the minimum, but to give sacrificially to God. If each and every one of us in this church has the attitude of that widow in the New Testament and the attitude of that young mother in that Dominican Republic worship service, we will not only meet our challenge goal for this renovation, I believe we'll exceed it. And more importantly, we will please God. We will honor God through our sacrificial giving. The same God who gave His only Son, His most precious possession for us, we will honor Him and please Him. And that will make all the difference.